From the wetlands of New Hampshire to the shores of California, I've seen the heart of this nation. And though it's been tested and tried by division, it still beats with generosity, kindness, and courage.
Oh God, that is the funniest thing that I've seen today. At the end of that video, Joe Biden turns to his wife and said, "Was that you?" I did that. I find this video funny because I've always joked that Joe Biden is the type of guy that would be in an elevator with you. It's just you and him. He'd cut one. He'd look at you and say, "Hey, was that you?" So I imagine that at the end of this video, he turns to his wife and said, "Did you do that? Was that you?" Now, I don't think that video is real. More likely than not, that video is not real. Doesn't stop that video from being funny as all hell. I think the thing that makes the video work is Joe Biden's facial expressions. A, why do you have your wife speaking for you in these videos? This has been happening over and over and over again, where his wife would basically just run the show. It's a weird thing. I mean, Joe Biden is supposed to be the person running for office, not his wife. I don't have any issue with his wife. I mean, Jane Sanders every so often takes over and, gives a speech or something. But this is constant, and this is kind of in these live streams. It's just really, really bizarre. And it comes across as if Joe Biden does not have the cognitive skill to do that for a long period of time, in which case she steps in order to help pass the time between the times where he can get something out. I want to show you the saddest video that I think I've seen of Joe Biden. Funny, but also in a weird way sad, because when you think about it, this is the person who the Democratic Party lined up behind completely. This is our guy. This is the guy that's going to beat Trump like a drum. And you have all of these actors who are coming out now wanting to be the vice president of this particular guy. I got to be honest, I am astonished that this is where we are politically. They are arguing that rape is not a deal breaker, even if it's from the standpoint of, do you believe women or not? They would say yes, however, not that woman, especially if it's politically inconvenient for us. And yet, one Democrat after the next across the board supports Biden on this front. It is the weirdest thing ever. Mainstream media tries to ignore it. When Washington Post covered it today, they framed it in this weird way. Biden supporters has been attacking Tara Reade as a Russian plant. All I'm saying, it's obscene that this is the candidate that the Democratic Party lined up behind in order to stop Sanders. Buyer's remorse in the flesh. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. This video is not going to be long. I just want to laugh at this video. Kind of laugh. Like I said, it's slightly sad, but not sad from the standpoint of a cognitively damaged man running for office with a political class that is basically trying to give him a pass, and a media that is trying to give him a pass because they hate Trump so much. No, not that. That's not sad at all. Joe Biden chose to put himself in this particular predicament. Joe Biden didn't necessarily care about anything else, even with his declining mental health. He's looking at the presidency as basically a job advancement as opposed to a position where you're actually going to take that position to do things. And yet, Sanders didn't run his race. So I guess it doesn't matter, right? If you don't go after the guy, then you can't necessarily bitch about it after the fact when you lose. You lost because you didn't even fight. I guess my point is, the sad part about this is that this is the guy. Meaning, the guy who had these big policy ideas, the best ideas, at least from the way that the public was looking at him, did not have it in him to run a campaign that was somewhat scorched earth and the way he would have needed to run that campaign in order to win. Because the campaign he would have needed to run would have been against an entire system, not against one individual candidate. Meaning, in the same way that the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, is trying to tie Nancy Pelosi to basically the other Democrats because she's unpopular, Sanders would be able to do the same thing with Congress and the Democratic Party that is deeply unpopular. That's if you want to win, though. If you don't want to win and you want to try to do, you think other things are that much more important than your policy agenda accomplish, you have all of these people on the street, you have all of these people going bankrupt for healthcare, you have all of these elderly people making the choice between food or medication, you have all of these people with underperforming healthcare, meaning not great healthcare. I guess my point is you have all of these issues that are plaguing the planet, even climate change, to which you were willing to spend $30 trillion to deal with, which gets across the level of significance and needing to do something about that. That is indeed an existential threat, not to mention the consequences coming from that, like the lowering of the quality of our foods, or for that matter, even this notion of the insects dying off based on our own operation around the globe. Look, I guess my basic point is, of all of the candidates, the guy who had a policy agenda, very specific, an ideological point of view in the way that he wanted to take the country that would have been to the benefit of the overwhelming majority of that country, didn't have it in him to run a campaign that epitomized those beliefs and that rhetoric. That's all. Look, I'd make the basic point. If you're on the left and you're trying to figure out what do you do next, there is no magical door. Bernie Sanders was your Hail Mary. In Bernie Sanders being your Hail Mary, that candidate flamed out. So the question for you now is, what's next? What do you have at your disposal? And what can you do to try to get what you want affected in the political space? The first thing is to ditch Sanders. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that from this point out, he is doing everything that he can to get Joe Biden elected, and he is working against your interests. For the last 40 years, the left has, for the most part, been the political equivalent of the abused, a battered wife. And even now, the majority of lefties will end up in a party that was entirely willing to tank it to Trump by going to a brokered convention, which, by the way, reveals the con. For all of those years, they've told you that they would back you, or they've insinuated that they would back you, but they also said you had nowhere else to go. And under this belief that you're lessening harm by backing the Democratic Party or backing the Democrat in office, regardless of what those Democrats do, you've gotten very narrow in your vision. Whereas elections need to be looked at over the course of time, from one election to the next, to the next, to the next. As your standards erode, as you're willing to accept one candidate that's that much more worse than the other candidate, as they pass one horrible policy after the next, and you still fall in line and back them, you basically incentivize your own malignment, your own taking advantage of, your own abuse. Think about what I'm saying for the moment. If you can make the argument that you have nowhere else to go, and basically you're stuck with us, well, if you accept that argument, and you walk around thinking you're a Democrat, and these guys are talking about you, calling you sexist and abusive and all of this other stuff that they've attacked you with for the past 7 months. And then Joe Biden said, yes, even in the middle of a pandemic, I will veto your signature legislation if it just so happened a miracle got it over the finish line in the House and in the in the House and the Senate. I guess I'm making the point that backing somebody, just like you have over the last 40 years, that in no way represent your policy interests, does not advance your policy interests. In fact, it does the opposite. If you want to get anything real or accomplished in regards to policy, you need to gain some level of leverage and credibility in the political space. That is leaving and start focusing on policy, not necessarily party, with the notion that you will get our support or you will not get our support based on whether you support our policy agenda or not. It's almost automatic. If you want this, then the very basic that we're willing to accept is Medicare for all, expansion of Social Security, and yes, getting rid of student debt. I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that the left needs to organize under policy, not parties. You don't necessarily want this process where you're excluding people or being divisive in the way that you're trying to organize. No. The left fundamentally agrees on a basic minimum in regards to policy. And I would say that's where you need to be. If the Democratic Party lose, understand you are not a Democrat. They chose to go with Joe Biden. They chose to put Joe Biden in that office. They chose to ignore your policy concession or the concessions that you wanted in order to get Joe Biden's that support. They chose to ignore all that. Did the Democratic Party not care enough about beating Donald Trump that they weren't willing to give policy concessions that the majority of the public, even and more so in the Democratic Party, supports? I mean, that's basically what the question is. If they want to point the finger at you and say you were responsible for Donald Trump winning that race, say yes, goddamn right we were, and we will continue to be responsible for the Democrat losing for as long as they're not willing to accept the policy demands that are basically popular across the board, and particularly in the Democratic Party. What do you want to do? Die as a party, or do you want to actually make concessions? Now, it's possible that the Democratic Party looks at this and thinks, we can't make concessions because if we make concessions, this would be a win from the standpoint of the left and it would embolden the left. And we don't believe that the majority of lefties are going to pull out and unify under this notion of policy in that way. So yes, they're going to test you either way in this case. I'm making the point that Joe Biden will likely lose anyway. Potentially. I mean, the coronavirus is a wild card. But your best bet to get anything politically accomplished is to start on this notion that there are actual litmus tests. You understand, by not having litmus tests, not having standards, when you were under Bill Clinton, when it moved from Bush, when it went to Obama, when it went to Hillary Clinton, that you basically allowed the party to shift further and further to the right in the interests of the 1% and that top class against the interests of workers and everything else, foregoing your responsibility to deal with these vagaries of our particular system, all out of this notion of cowardice and less harm. It's not less harm if it led you to having Trump in that office. You realize that part of the reason a lot of people don't vote has to do with those people not believing that the voting process works for them. Meaning Clinton, Obama, Al Gore, John Kerry, these centrists deaden the population and undercuts the vote total. Let's hear Biden in this ad. I've ran into a tangent, but let's hear Biden. Saddest ad ever. At least I think so.
I would get much more engaged in the world. We can't step back. If, in fact, for example, we solve the problem in the United States of America and you don't solve it in other parts of the world, you know what's going to happen. You're going to have travel bans. You're going to not be able to have economic intercourse around the world. There's a lot. Look, when America goes alone, when America is first, it's America alone. And the idea that I would give.
Can't have economic intercourse around the world, man. Can't have that economic intercourse. That's right, Joe. Economic intercourse. I don't know what that is, but let's hear that again. That's awesome. I've never heard that phrase before. We can't have economic intercourse around the world.
Much more engaged in the world. We can't step back. If, in fact, for example, we solve the problem in the United States of America and you don't solve it in other parts of the world, you know what's going to happen. You're going to have travel bans. You're going to not be able to have economic intercourse around the world. There's a lot. Look, when America goes alone, when America is first, it's America alone. And the idea that I would give much more.
America always focused in its interests first. That's not new with Donald Trump. When Obama was trying to knock down Syria or knock down Venezuela, you think he was doing it for his health, or you think he was doing it because there was economic potential or geopolitical interests in those regions? When we back the Kurds in one case and then fuck them over in another case. Again, why are we doing that? We do with what is in our foreign policy or geopolitical or economic interests. That is almost as an absolute. This notion that Donald Trump is uniquely quote unquote America first is nonsense. I don't even know what that means. And Donald Trump, from the standpoint of America first, but just basically means corporations first. This clip is utterly sad. This man is a guy who all of these people lined up behind and said, this is the guy who we think is the best for president. I can show you 1,000 of these clips easily. Pretty much every time he comes out, he does that. Now, the catch is he is going to be on a debate stage. He is going to be in all of these various tense situations. And the question they didn't ask him about as he went into this weird direction? Hey, what about Tara Reid? What about Tara Reid? Your other video said believe women, and now you're saying not this woman. Believe the other woman, not this one. Look, my very basic point. This is the guy that is going to supposed to go up against Trump to hold back the night. I would make the argument to you that this doesn't matter to the Democratic Party because the thing that mattered most, that they were most concerned about, was stopping Sanders. And again, the jig was up the moment that they were willing to go to a brokered convention, because what that means is each and every one of them knew that if they did that they would lose, because every lefty that might have backed Joe Biden, the majority that might have backed Joe Biden, would not back whoever takes that from Sanders. I mean, understand what we're saying. We're talking about going to the broker convention, and then in the second round, ripping it out of Sanders' hands and expecting lefties to turn around and back the party. Do you honestly believe that lefties would do that after that? Right now, with them taking Sanders out of New York, you've had a lot of people say, yeah, I'm done. I'm not backing the party. That was just a token gesture, by the way. And yet, they have him responding in that way. What would happen if they ripped it from his hands? Engage that. Deal with that. Because what does that mean? That means that they were entirely and perfectly willing to lose to Donald Trump if that meant stopping Sanders. The priority here was stopping you. I hope you understand what I mean by that. For the last 40 years, they've told you you have nowhere else to go, which basically meant the only other party is the Republican Party. You either accept us screwing you over, or you go to the Republican Party. Now, the catch is that's not entirely true. Null is a value. And as I did software, I put null in situations all the time, meaning it's a non-vote. That non-vote is philosophically, to some degree, a vote of no confidence in both of the political parties. That is a position. And that is a position that can make the Democratic Party lose if they are willing to just let that particular demographic go. I guess the point I'm making here is, despite telling you you had nowhere else to go, they were perfectly willing to go there. The place that you said, that they continuously told you you could not go. They used your own fear against you while simultaneously being perfectly willing to go to that particular direction if it meant stopping you. You need to internalize that. My point is, you're not of the same party. They were willing to put this guy up. This guy. They want him.
Engaged in the world. We can't step back. If, in fact, for example, we solve the problem in the United States of America and you don't solve it in other parts of the world, you know what's going to happen. We're going to have...
You know, what's funny is he crosses his arms. Did you notice that? That's a power position. I'm about to say some godlike shit here. Fair enough. You're about to say some godlike shit here. Let's hear what you're about to say.
You're going to have travel bans. You're going to not be able to have economic intercourse around the world. There's a lot. Look, when America goes alone, when America is first, it's America alone. And the idea that I would get much more engaged in the world, you know what's going to happen. You're going to have travel bans. You're going to not be able to have economic intercourse around the happen. You're going to have travel bans. You're going to not be able to have economic intercourse around the world. Travel bans. You're going to not be able to have economic intercourse around the world. Have economic intercourse around the world.
Okay, I'll stop. I'm sorry. This video is so wild to me because he keeps doing this, and it doesn't seem like. You know, when this was happening, I kept saying, I can't be the only one that see this. And lefties will point out, this guy, he has a screw loose. How do you think he's going to beat Trump in this situation, going on one debate stage after the next, ending up in all of this political combat? I will tell you this. I understand that Bernie Sanders thought he was doing the best in regards to trying to lessen harm and not wanting to become Ralph Nader and all of this other stuff. Fair enough. But understand, you did him no favors. Right now, because you didn't go after Joe Biden in the way that campaigns typically would go after them in these kind of political competitions, you've created a situation where any attack that hits Joe Biden is new. Meaning, you haven't inoculated him from anything. You don't know whether Joe Biden has a glass jaw because you haven't necessarily even tested this stuff out in the primary to figure out what sticks versus not. The Hunter Biden stuff may actually stick. The rape charge may actually stick. The lying about civil rights and him flaming out in those races may actually stick. Running those videos where you can show AOC or Elizabeth Warren saying, I believe women, or Kamala Harris saying, I believe Tara Reid, or for that matter, Abrams. All of these strong, supposedly feminist women who are now backing a guy who's accused of basically sexual assault. And understand, all of them to some degree has basically made the point, look, we should believe women. Almost as a policy statement, you should believe women. And now the basic ad is just going to be multiple ads. So do they not believe this woman? And why not? They're even going to play the ad with AOC making a point about, hey, when it's politically expedient, you shouldn't, when it's politically disadvantageous to you, that's not integrity at all. And yes, then they're going to show Joe Biden's face. I guess my point is, all of these things are deficiencies in regards to this particular candidate and uniquely unable to explain or defend himself. He's going to have to deal with all of that. I have no idea. The level of propaganda that goes into people's heads where they would listen and watch that guy and think to themselves, he's incompetent, but he's electable, as if the two things are detached from one another. It's utterly insane. I'll leave this here. Like, share, and subscribe.